rational to believe in God. Many people think that faith and reason are opposites, that belief in God and tough-minded logical reasoning are like oil and water. They are wrong. Belief in God is far more rational than atheism. Logic can show that there is a God. If you look at the universe with common sense and an open mind, you'll find that it's full of God's fingerprints. A good place to start is with an argument by Thomas Aquinas, the great 13th century philosopher and theologian. The argument starts with the not very startling observation that things move. But nothing moves for no reason. Something must cause that movement. And whatever caused that must be caused by something else, and so on. But this causal chain cannot go backwards forever. It must have a beginning. There must be an unmoved mover to begin all the motion in the universe, a first domino to start the whole chain moving, since mere matter never moves itself. A modern objection to this argument is that some movements in quantum mechanics, radioactive decay for example, have no discernible cause. But hang on a second. Just because scientists don't see a cause doesn't mean there isn't one. It just means science hasn't found it yet. Maybe someday they will. But then there will have to be a new cause to explain that one, and so on and so on. But science will never find the first cause. That's no knock on science. It simply means that a first cause lies outside the realm of science. Another way to explain this argument is that everything that begins must have a cause. Nothing can come from nothing. So if there's no first cause, there can't be second causes, or anything at all. In other words, if there's no creator, there can't be a universe. But what if the universe were infinitely old, you might ask? Well, all scientists today agree that the universe is not infinitely old, that it had a beginning in the Big Bang. If the universe had a beginning, then it didn't have to exist. And things which don't have to exist must have a cause. There's confirmation of this argument from Big Bang cosmology. We now know that all matter, that is, the whole universe, came into existence some 13.7 billion years ago, and it's been expanding and cooling ever since. No scientist doubts that anymore, even though, before it was scientifically proved, atheists called it creationism in disguise. Now, add to this premise a very logical second premise, the principle of causality, that nothing begins without an adequate cause. And you get the conclusion that since there was a Big Bang, there must be a Big Banger. But is this Big Banger God? Why couldn't it be just another universe? Because Einstein's general theory of relativity says that all time is relative to matter, and since all matter began 13.7 billion years ago, so did all time. So there's no time before the Big Bang. And even if there is time before the Big Bang, even if there is a multiverse, that is, many universes with many Big Bangs, as string theory says is mathematically possible, that too must have a beginning. An absolute beginning is what most people mean by God. Yet some atheists find the existence of an infinite number of other universes more rational than the existence of a creator. Never mind that there is no empirical evidence at all that any of these unknown universes exists, let alone 1,000 or a gazillion. How far will scientists go to avoid having to conclude that God created the universe? Here's what Stanford physicist Leonard Susskind said. Real scientists resist the temptation to explain creation by divine intervention. We resist to the death all explanations of the world based on anything but the laws of physics. Yet the father of modern physics, Sir Isaac Newton, believed fervently in God. Was he not a real scientist? Can you believe in God and be a scientist and not be a fraud? According to Susskind, apparently not. So who exactly are the closed-minded ones in this debate? The conclusion that God exists doesn't require faith. Atheism requires faith. It takes faith to believe in everything coming from nothing. It takes only reason to believe in everything coming from God.
You're familiar with the Big Bang, aren't you? The concept is everything fit, basically, inside of the end of this pencil. A little tiny dot that was red hot. That's how everything started. Shh. Don't ask where all that stuff came from or how it got put into the pencil tip. Those are details we're still working on. Then one day, billions and billions of years ago, this little pencil tip decided to go kaboom! And look at how organized it all got. Watch the clip, contestant number 2, and please note the lack of explanation for how this actually happened.
It was Edwin Hubble who first noticed that our universe is expanding by noting that galaxies seem to be flying further and further apart. This implied that everything should have started with the monumental explosion of an infinitely hot, infinitely small point. This idea was jokingly referred to at the time as the Big Bang, but as the evidence piled up, the notion and the name actually stuck. We know that after the Big Bang, the universe cooled down to form the stars and galaxies that we see today. Cosmologists have plenty of ideas about how this happened. But we can also probe the origins of the universe by recreating the hot, dense conditions that existed at the beginning of time in the laboratory.
Here's the rub, though. You can't have a laboratory, because nothing doesn't make a little hot pointed in. By the way, infinitely hot and infinitely small, if it's infinitely hot, how could it exist? And infinitely small, how can it be infinitely small? Furthermore, if you're going to claim that you can recreate that from a laboratory, is that with test tubes? Is that with electricity? Is that with lighting? Is that with some sort of pencil tip that you put into the little thing and shake it around? You can't recreate that experiment. Scientists have plenty of ideas. Yeah, that's what they are. They're ideas, but they are all concocted out of the figment of their imagination. Why? They don't have themselves any eyewitnesses. Hey, have you heard that dinosaurs evolved into birds? This clip is going to show you exactly how it happened.
The most distant feathered relatives of birds had straight feathers that looked like wires. Then these wires split apart, producing simple branches. In many dinosaur lineages, these simple feathers evolved into more intricate ones, including some that we see today on birds. At the same time, the feathers spread across the bodies of dinosaurs, turning from sparse patches of fuzz into dense plumage, which even extended down to their legs. A few fossils even preserve some of the molecules that give feathers color. They reveal a beautiful range of colors.
See how that works? This is how you prove your theory. You restate it, and then you put it into cartoon form without any proof or evidence. The Discovery Channel on this clip explaining how we went from man, monkey, sort of, to mermaid.
If our distant ancestors spent time living in the sea, is it possible that one group split off from the rest? And rather than retreating from the water, did they go deeper in?
Nope, I'm not kidding. The Discovery Channel suggesting that somehow we were monkeys, we came down from the trees, there was more food by the water, no evidence for any of this, but we spent a lot of time splashing and frolicking in the sea, eating apparently our cousins, when we decided, hey, you guys can hang out on land. I think I'm just going to make my way into the water and hang there for the next few million years. Don't ask questions about how they developed gills when they had lungs. Those are details we haven't exactly worked out yet, but just trust us because we wear lab coats with pocket protectors. Evolution, another wonky theory. If there is not an objective source of morality, the humanist has no basis for language, grammar, morality, anything.
If God does not exist, the Nazis were not wrong. It's just your opinion that they were wrong. If God does not exist, love is no better than rape. Not in an objective way anyway. You just may not like it. It's just unfashionable perhaps, but it's not really wrong. If God does not exist, blowing up innocent people watching a marathon is morally no different than feeding the poor. It's just your opinion. If God does not exist, religious crusades are not wrong. I had the opportunity to debate Christopher Hitchens a couple times. I love Christopher Hitchens. He was great. We had a lot of fun. He had a British accent, so he sounded even more brilliant than he was. And you could see both our debates on our website, crossexamined.org, for free. And Hitchens kept talking about all the evil religious people were doing in the Crusades. I said, Christopher, I agree with you. Exactly. But you know what? There's nothing wrong with that if there's no God. Because there's no standard of righteousness. If there's no standard of righteousness, nothing can be unrighteous. In fact, tolerance is no better than intolerance. David, with his organization, rightfully fights for tolerance for atheists. But look, if there's no God, why tolerate anything? Because there is no, in fact, there are no human rights if there is no God. Everything is a matter of opinion. If we're just overgrown germs that got here by some evolutionary process, then we're no different than any other animal. There is no objective morality if there is no God. Now, by the way, I didn't say atheists weren't good people. I didn't say atheists couldn't know morality. What I'm saying here is atheists can't justify morality.
Without an objective source, there are only preferences, and you cannot tell me that bullying is bad. You can't tell me what is foul or profane language. You can't even tell me what's good grammar or bad grammar. Every time somebody makes a statement like, that's prettier, that's better, that's nicer, that's more appropriate, they are actually recognizing, yes, God, you do exist. And this applies to so many.
They ignore the telltale signs, say they can't find a God. Men with the real truth hurt their pride, so they took him to the court the day he died. Just for fun they said, where's your God? That's just the atheist. Some people never change. That's just the atheist.
Richard Dawkins, who hates creationists, said, it is absolutely safe to say that if you meet someone who claims not to believe in evolution, that person is ignorant, stupid, or insane, or wicked. According to the dictionary, stupid means lacking normal intelligence, foolish, silly, a stupid idea, dull and boring. I think evolution is stupid. First, we have cosmic evolution. That would be the Big Bang. There is no evidence whatsoever for that. We'll get into that in just a moment. Then we'd have to have chemical evolution. See, the Big Bang supposedly made hydrogen. Well, how did we get 92 elements, plus the synthetic ones? I mean, how did the chemicals evolve? They don't talk about that much, but that would have to happen. Thirdly, we'd have to have stellar and planetary evolution. Did you know the stars would have to evolve? There's an awful lot of stars out there, folks, but nobody's ever seen one form. There's enough stars out there that everybody on Earth can personally own 2 trillion of them. We've never seen one star forming. We see them blow up from time to time. It's called a nova or a supernova. We've never seen one form. One professor told me one time, he said, well, we calculated in the laboratory that if 20 stars explode near each other, it'll produce enough energy to make a brand new star. I said, well, that's brilliant. You've got to lose 20 to gain 1. Organic evolution. That would be the origin of life. How did life get started from non-living material? Now, according to the evolution theory, that would have to happen somewhere along the line, long ago and far away. Life had to come from non-living material. And yet, we've never seen that happen. There is no evidence that it can happen. We'll talk about that in a minute. Fifthly, we would have macroevolution. That is where an animal changes into a different kind of animal. Nobody's ever seen a dog produce a non-dog. But the evolutionist believes a dog came from a rock, if you go back far enough in time, 4.6 billion years. Finally, we have microevolution. Now, I don't like this word, okay, because it gets people confused. I think we ought to just call it a variation. But microevolution happens, folks. That is a fact of science. Animals produce a variety of offspring, but it's always the same kind. The first 5 definitions of evolution are stupid. It doesn't happen. It's certainly not part of science. It's something you have to believe in. They teach the kids it all started with a big bang 20 billion years ago. A big bang. I like to ask them some simple questions. What exploded? Well, the Big Bang Theory, as we'll see in a minute, is stupid. I don't know of a better way to say it. I'm trying to be nice to them, but it is just stupid. The Big Bang idea started with a Belgian astronomer named George something, can't pronounce his last name. George said that this original matter was no more than a few light years in diameter. At the very least, that would be 2, or about 12 trillion miles. So they started off teaching a spot 12 trillion miles across was what exploded. Well, they revised that down. In 1965, they said, no, it was only 275 million miles across. Well, that's way down from 12 trillion. 1972, they said, no, it's only 71 million miles across. I don't know how they know this stuff, but this is what they taught, okay? 1974, they said it was only 54,000 miles across. 1983, they said it was the trillionth the diameter of a proton. Now they're saying it's nothing at all. Nothing exploded. And here we are. This is what the textbooks teach. 18 to 20 billion years ago, all the matter in the universe was concentrated into one very dense, very hot region that may have been much smaller than a period on this page. That's stupid. This one says, all of the matter and energy someday will once again be packed into a small area, no bigger than the period at the end of this sentence. Then another big bang will occur. It happens every 80 to 100 billion years. Now, this textbook author was brilliant. I could not believe how smart this guy was. He said, boys and girls, nothing really means nothing. You have to be at least that smart to write a book. He said, not only matter and energy would disappear, but also space and time. However, physicists theorize that from this state of nothingness, the universe began in a gigantic explosion. What? Yes, boys and girls, you see, nothing exploded, and here we are. Now, who can argue with logic like that? I said, tell me, sir, how did the universe get here? He said, well, 20 billion years ago, all the matter was squished in this little tiny dot, and it was spinning real fast, and it exploded. Big bang. And pieces flew off and became the galaxies and the sun, the moon, the stars, and finally, you know, people. Here we are. So I asked this professor if I could ask him some questions about the Big Bang. He said, sure, what would you like to know? I said, well, sir, you told me 20 billion years ago, all the matter in the universe was squished in this little tiny dot, and it was spinning faster and faster and exploded. I said, where did all this matter come from? He said, well, we don't know that for sure. I said, okay, now, sir, hold it. If I told you that I believe about 6,000 years ago God created the heaven and the earth, like the Bible teaches, you're going to say, and where did God come from? And I don't know. But you said 20 billion years ago there was a Big Bang, and you don't know where the dirt came from. So basically, I believe in the beginning God, and you believe in the beginning dirt. Don't tell me my theory is religious and yours is science. Oh, no, sir, they're both religious. So I asked the professor, where did the matter come from? He said, I don't know. I said, well, sir, would you please tell me where the laws came from? The universe is run by laws, gravity, centrifugal force, inertia. Who gave the laws? He said, we don't know that either. I said, sir, could you tell me where the energy came from? You know, it takes energy to make a big bang. Who bought the gas to run this machine anyway? He said, we don't know that either. I said, does Berkeley have a merry-go-round? He said, no, we don't have a merry-go-round at Berkeley. I said, you ought to get one. You could learn some good science on a merry-go-round. If you put some fourth graders on a merry-go-round, we're going to spin the merry-go-round clockwise. The kids are going to go through 4 phases. They start off in phase 1. They're screaming at the football players. Come on, let's go, faster, faster. Can't you go any faster? You get up around 30 miles an hour. The kids enter phase 2, where they stop screaming. They just quietly concentrate on trying to hang on for dear life. You get up around 60 miles an hour. The kids enter phase 3, where they start screaming again. But now they're screaming, stop, stop, please, slow down. Don't stop, though. Keep going faster and faster. When you get to about 100 miles an hour, you should enter phase 4. That's where the kids begin to fly off the merry-go-round. Now, when this happens, you will notice a very interesting phenomena of physics. If the merry-go-round is going clockwise, when the kid flies off, the kid will be spinning clockwise until he encounters resistance, like a tree or telephone pole. That's because of a law in physics known as the conservation of angular momentum. You see, if a spinning object breaks apart in a frictionless environment, the fragments will all spin the same direction. It's very simple. It's because the outside is moving faster than the inside. And so it keeps the same direction of spin. The professor said, yes, I understand about the conservation of angular momentum. I said, well, good. I'd like to ask you a question then, sir. If the whole universe began as a swirling dot, like you said, why do 2 planets spin backwards? He said, that's interesting. I said, no, that's more than interesting. It's kind of hard on your Big Bang Theory. Not only that, 6 of the moons are spinning backwards. Why? He said, I don't know. Why do you think they're going backwards? I was hoping he was going to ask that. I said, well, sir, I believe it's very simple. You see, I believe in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth, and God did it that way on purpose, just to make the Big Bang Theory look stupid. Then they tell the kids the earth formed from a hot molten mass 4.6 billion years ago. This is part of the theory, and it's in all the textbooks. 4.6 billion years ago, earth cooled down, formed a rocky crust. I think that is stupid, and I'll show you why. Was the earth ever really a hot molten mass 4.6 billion years ago, and it cooled down? This textbook says, as earth formed, the surface was like the moon. There were hot pools of bubbling lava. I don't think so. My Bible says the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. So the earth was not created a hot molten mass. It was created under water, which means it has to be less than 212 degrees Fahrenheit or 100 degrees centigrade, or it wouldn't be water, it'd be steam. So the earth was never a hot molten mass according to Scripture. Then when you look in the granite rocks, you find little tiny halos made of polonium. Now these polonium halos are absolutely amazing. Robert Gentry, a friend of mine from Knoxville, Tennessee area, he has been studying radiopolonium halos for a long time. I met him back in the year 2000 and went down to his laboratory, and I got to see some of the halos through the microscope. These little polonium halos are interesting because they have a half-life of less than a few minutes. If the rock was hot, when the polonium, radioactive polonium, decayed and sent out the little particles and made the halo, it would melt away. Like at 4th of July, they shoot fireworks up. Makes a circle. Does the circle stay there? No, it all falls down, right? There are probably none up there now from the last 4th of July, are there? You'd have to freeze the whole atmosphere to keep that sphere in place. This polonium would have to be decaying in a rock that is already solid. So the earth was never a hot molten mass. See, according to the theory, 20 billion years ago there was a big bang. 4.6 billion years ago the earth cooled down, formed a hard rocky crust, and it rained on the rocks for millions of years and turned them into soup. And the soup came alive about 3 billion years ago. This is what the books teach. This fellow says, both the origin of life and the origin of major groups of animals remains unknown. How did life get started anyway? Well, this textbook tells the kids, oceans formed as it rained on the rocks for millions of years. Yes, boys and girls, millions of years of torrential rains created great oceans. And swirling in the waters of the oceans is a bubbling broth of complex chemicals. Progress from a complex chemical soup to a living organism is very slow. Well, I guess it is. It's totally stopped. Was your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandpa soup? I think that's stupid, okay? First living self-replicating systems must have emerged in this soup. I don't think so. Here's what students are taught in school. This picture of the different glass tubes and flasks and pipes going around, they tell them this is how they made life in the laboratory. He said he studied the chemical reactions of gases that existed in Earth's primitive atmosphere. Ooh, now this is important, okay? Notice up in the upper right-hand corner, he had methane, ammonia, water vapor, and hydrogen, no oxygen. He circulated these gases through these tubes through a spark, supposed to represent lightning. And sure enough, it produced a red goo at the bottom of the flask and had some amino acids in it. They didn't come close to getting life, though. Miller excluded oxygen in a reducing atmosphere because life could not evolve with oxygen. Anything that got together would oxidize. Cut a banana open, lay it on the table, it'll turn brown, it'll oxidize. Okay, so will an apple, so will anything alive. It'll oxidize. So that's why he didn't have any oxygen in the experiment. One of his gases was ammonia. Well, this creates a real serious problem because ammonia is destroyed by UV light. And UV light must be blocked by ozone, which is made from oxygen. I got a problem here. This textbook says several billion years ago, Earth's atmosphere had no free oxygen. Well, that's just simply not true. Ozone is made from oxygen, and it blocks UV light, and ammonia, one of the gases needed for the experiment, is destroyed by UV light. So life cannot evolve without oxygen. But also life cannot evolve with oxygen. Well, I got a solution for that one. It didn't evolve. And by the way, the Earth has always had oxygen, even more than it does today, okay? Air bubbles are often found trapped in amber, like the movie Jurassic Park, you know, where they drilled in and got the mosquito blood. These air bubbles, though, have 50% more oxygen than we do. But this textbook says the mixture at the bottom of the flask was rich in amino acids. Oh, come on. That is stupid. It was not rich in amino acids. Let's tell the kids what they really found, okay? He filtered out the product. As this gas went through the tubes, he sparked it, produced this goo at the bottom, and he drew the goo off, because if it went through again, it would be destroyed by the spark. Now, in real life, you're not going to get a section of the ocean protected. They say this just happened by chance in the ocean. You can't filter out the product then. Secondly, what he made was 85% tar, 13% carboxylic acid, 2% amino acids. So 98% of his mixture was poisonous to life. I would not call that a success. And there are 20 different amino acids, sort of like 26 letters in the alphabet. There are 20 amino acids. Those amino acids go together to make proteins, like letters go together to make sentences. Mostly he made just 2 of these amino acids. And they bond with the tar and the acid very quickly, more readily than with each other. It was a failure as an experiment. Amino acids are like letters of the alphabet, sort of like building blocks. You have to have a bunch of amino acids to make a protein. Then you have to have a bunch of proteins to make a cell. And you got to have a bunch of cells to make an organism. And one cell is more complex than a space shuttle. And all he got was a couple of the amino acids. That's like me dropping toothpicks, and I happen to make a few letters of the alphabet. That's possible, isn't it? Toothpicks could fall in the shape of a T, or an H, or an I, or an E. That's possible. But if I'm able to drop toothpicks and produce a few letters of the alphabet, should I therefore conclude that nobody wrote Webster's dictionary? Asked me to speak at this college in Boston one time. This preacher called all the colleges and universities around Boston and said, would you like to have Kent Hovind come speak at your college? Finally, one professor said, yes, he can come speak at our school if our professors can ask him any questions they want, because we want to show our students how dumb these creationists really are. So the preacher called me and said, Brother Hovind, would you like to speak at this college and let them make fun of you for a couple hours? I said I would be honored. And 2,000 years ago, Jesus came, and I gave them the basic Bible story, okay? Then I told them what they believe. Because most of them don't know what they believe. You have to tell them. You guys believe 20 billion years ago there was a big bang where nothing exploded and produced everything. 4.6 billion years ago the earth cooled down, made a hard rocky crust. It rained on the rocks for millions of years, turned them into soup, and the soup came alive 3 billion years ago. And this early life form found somebody to marry. Boy, now that's a good trick. And something to eat, of course, and slowly evolved into everything we see today. One professor was getting kind of upset about this time. I seem to do that to them. He said, Mr. Hovind, there are hundreds of varieties of dogs in the world. I said, yes, sir, you're right about that. He said, do you mean to tell me that you believe all these dogs came from 2 dogs off a Noah's Ark? You expect me to believe that? Ha, ha, ha. I said, sir, would you look at what you're teaching your students? You're teaching your students that all the dogs in the world came from a rock. I had one woman come to me after a debate one time. She was steaming down the aisle. Boy, she was mad. Oh, I could tell I'm in trouble now. I stood there quivering in my boots, you know. She walked up and she said, tonight you said we believe we come from a rock. We do not believe that. I said, well, ma'am, calm down just for a minute. I said, do you believe in evolution? She said, yes, I do. I'm a professor here at the university. I said, well, would you please tell me then where we came from? She said, we came from a macromolecule. I said, where did that come from? She said, from the oceans, from the prebiotic soup. I said, where did that come from? She said, well, it rained on the rocks for millions of years. And you could see it was slowly dawning on her. I do believe I come from a rock, don't I? This textbook says, all the many forms of life on earth today are descended from a common ancestor. What? You mean the birds and the bananas have a common ancestor? Isn't that what he says? Found in a population of primitive unicellular organisms. Well, in the first place, there's no such thing as a primitive unicellular organism, okay? One single cell is more complex than a space shuttle. All the forms of life are descended from a common ancestor found in a population of primitive unicellular organisms. What were those first cells like? How do we know? What events led up to their formation? No traces of those events remain. Did you catch that? Hey kid, we know what happened, but there's no proof. The humans, mammals, birds, crocodiles, all had a common ancestor. Well, anything inside that circle is religious speculation. It is stupid. Reptiles produce reptiles, dogs produce dogs, people produce people, and there's never been an exception to that. Darwin said, though, if my theory be true, here's his book right here. You can look on page 211. He said, if my theory be true, numberless intermediate varieties must assuredly have existed. Boy, you're right about that, Charlie. I mean, to change from a rock to a dog would take a few changes. David Robb, who believes in evolution very strongly, says, in the years after Darwin, his advocates hoped to find predictable progressions. In general, these have not been found, yet the optimism has died hard, and some pure fantasy has crept into textbooks. Oh, you're kidding. Fantasy in our textbooks? They tell the kids they have evidence of evolution from fossils. I don't think so. That is stupid, okay? If you find a fossil in the dirt, all you know is it died. You don't know that it had any kids, do you? And you sure don't know that it had different kids. I mean, think about it. You're in a court of law. You bring in a bone to the judge. Judge, I found this bone in the dirt. This is the ancestor of all the humans today. They would laugh at you. You don't know that that's the ancestor of anybody, do you? And why on earth would you think a bone in the dirt can do something animals today cannot do? Animals today can only produce the same kind, right? Dogs produce dogs, folks. Luther Sunderland asked all the major evolutionists, he said, where is the evidence for evolution? They all said, well, somebody else has it. We don't have it over here. So he wrote a letter to Colin Patterson. He's the director of the British Museum of Natural History. They've got the largest fossil collection in the world. He said, Mr. Patterson, I read your book on evolution. I noticed you didn't show us the missing links. Why didn't you show us the missing links? Patterson wrote back and said, I fully agree with your comments on the lack of evolutionary transitions in my book. If I knew of any, fossil or living, I would certainly have included them. I will lay it on the line, there is not one such fossil. There are no missing links, folks. Though change intermediary stages is a persistent and nagging problem for evolution. We got the theory, we know it's true, now we just need the evidence. That's the way they think about it. Richard Goldschmidt said, maybe the first bird hatched from a reptile egg. Well, Richard, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but that's stupid. See, what's happened, these guys have looked for missing links in the fossil record. They can't find any, and so they say, well, maybe evolution happened so fast it wasn't preserved. Maybe a reptile laid an egg and a bird hatched out. Here's what happened. Charlie Darwin graduated from Bible college to be a preacher in the Anglican church in 1830. He couldn't get a job, so his dad pulled a few strings and got him a job on board HMS Beagle. He's going to sail around the world and collect bugs. And while he's sailing around, he stopped off at these islands right there called the Galapagos Islands. There on those islands, Charlie noticed there were 14 different varieties of finches. Charlie studied the birds very carefully and said, you know what, I think all these birds had a common ancestor. I bet you're right, Charlie. It was a bird. But the kids are going to be taught in school tomorrow in your town that the horse used to have 4 toes. Well, there's some things they don't tell the kids about this Eohippus to Equus series, which has been proven wrong 50 years ago, but still is in your textbooks right here in this town. They don't tell them the original so-called horse is the size of a fox. It was a meat eater and had 18 pairs of ribs. The next one had 15 pairs of ribs. A couple of trips through the buzzsaw did that. And then it miraculously grew back 19 pairs of ribs as it evolved, and then back to 18. They also don't tell them the whole thing's been proven wrong a long time ago. Like this guy says in the biology textbook, other examples like the gradual evolution of the horse have not held up under close examination. That's a polite way of saying it's proven wrong, okay? This G.G. Simpson back in 1950 said the example of the horse family has been unintentionally falsified. They knew 50 years ago this was false. Why do they keep that in your textbooks? This whole thing was made up by Othniel C. Marsh in 1874. He picked animals from all over the world and put them in order the way he thought it might have happened. They were never found in that order. Modern horses are found in the same layers as the so-called ancient Equus or Eohippus horse. They're found in the same layer. So it can't be the ancestor, that's for sure. The ancient horse is nothing but a Hyracotherium, which is still alive today. By the way, the ribs, the toes, the teeth are very different in these animals. In South America, the fossils go exactly backwards. Instead of three-toed to one-toed, it goes one-toed to three-toed in the fossil order. They won't talk about that much, but you check it out. That's a fact, folks. They're never found in the order presented in the textbooks. Three-toed and one-toed graze side by side. Plenty of information on the internet about that. Tulsa Zoo finally took out their display because so many folks complain, why do you have this horse evolution display in the zoo? It's been proven wrong 50 years ago. Take it out. And you folks ought to get together with your school board and say, look, on page whatever it is, 952 of our textbook, it says the horse evolved from a four-toed ancestor. Let's cut this page out. If you had a page in your textbook teaching the kids the earth was flat, would it be okay to demand that that page be removed? So then they're going to tell the kids, well, we have evidence for this theory. We think that one animal changed another, and we can show evidence because many animals have similar forelimb structure. This is called the argument from homology. Well, what do they tell the kids? They'll say, boys and girls, you have two bones in your wrist, radius and ulna. And boys and girls, look at the whale's flipper carefully. Did you know the whale has two bones in his flipper, and they're called the radius and the ulna? Same as ours. Wow. Who named them? By the way, the bones develop from different genes in these different organisms. They are not homologous organisms like they want you to believe. Similar design might prove the same engineer made the design. A lot of bridges in the world are kind of similar to each other. You can go compare, different suspension bridges around the world, Golden Gate Bridge and other bridges, and there's a lot of similarities. That doesn't prove one is the father of the other, or that a tornado put them up. No, it's a design that works good, okay? I discovered that the Pontiac lug nuts from a Pontiac will fit on a Chevy. They will. That proves they both evolved from a Honda 14 million years ago. Then they tell the kids about the geologic column. How many have ever heard that the different layers of the earth are different ages? They show the kids Grand Canyon. Yes, boys and girls, this one says, over millions of years, the Colorado River has carved the Grand Canyon from solid rock. I'm sorry, but that is stupid, okay? I'll explain why. Kids, you need to learn this. This is a very simple thing to learn, and you'll go through life much further than many of these professors go. Make yourself 3 columns. Facts are in the middle. It's a fact Grand Canyon exists. The evolutionist has an interpretation of that fact, and the creationist has an interpretation of the fact. Now, it's not part of the fact, it's an interpretation of the fact. The evolutionist says the canyon formed slowly by a little bit of water and lots of time. The creationist says, oh no, we think it formed quickly by lots of water and a little bit of time. It's a fact the earth has sedimentary layers. That's not a question. How did they get there? Well, the evolutionist says these layers formed slowly over millions of years. The creationist says, no, these layers are all from the flood in the days of Noah. Now, it seems like the professors are always trying to erase the line between their interpretation and the fact and make their interpretation part of the fact column, and it's not. And I think I can demonstrate Grand Canyon was not formed by the Colorado River. I was in a debate recently, and this professor said, Dr. Hovind, you're so stupid. Obviously, it took millions of years to form the Grand Canyon. Cut through layer upon layer of rock over millions of years. Well, if you built a dam across Grand Canyon, it would take a lot of dirt or concrete, but if you could, okay, it'd be a huge dam. A giant lake would back up behind that dam, covering several states. That purple area is all drained right through the Grand Canyon drainage basin. This snow line tells a very interesting story. In between these 2 red lines is snow. This is a picture from a satellite showing about 150 or 200 miles of the canyon area. Real wide shot. The river enters the canyon at the far right. The river is 2,800 feet above sea level. As it goes down through the canyon, the ground is rising up. It's called the Kaibab uplift, okay? The uplift is 7,000 or 8,000 feet above sea level. Interesting. The river flows downhill. All rivers flow downhill. So as the river enters the canyon and flows downhill from there, when it gets to the 1,800-foot elevation mark, the top of the canyon is 7,000 or 8,000 feet above sea level, so it's over a 1-mile drop. Very impressive, hole in the ground. But some points to ponder. I said to the professor, I said, sir, did you know the top is higher than the bottom? He said, yeah. I said, did you know the river only runs through the bottom? He said, yeah. I said, sir, the top is higher than where the river enters the canyon by 4,000 feet. Rivers don't flow uphill. There's no delta. Where's all the mud that washed out? There's no way that river made that canyon. Grand Canyon is a breached dam, a spillway that washed out. There was a lake probably for some length of time after the flood and got too full and all that water went roaring through there. Probably carved that canyon out in a couple of weeks. Not millions of years. Charlie Lyell wrote this book, 1830. In this book, he mocked at scriptures. He hated the Bible. You can see it mocking all through they're here. In here, he and other fellows back in that time, Cuvier, Steno, Stratus Smith, and some of these guys, they invented the geologic column. How many have ever heard of the geologic column before? They say each of the layers is a different age, you know, Cenozoic, Mesozoic, Paleozoic, Archeozoic, all them Zoic boys. And they gave each layer of rock a name, like maybe you saw the movie Jurassic Park, and an age, and an index fossil. This was done in 1830, way before there ever was a carbon dating or potassium argon dating or lead-208, lead-206, uranium-235, uranium-238. Didn't exist, folks. The dating technique didn't exist. They just made up these numbers out of the clear blue sky. The geologic column is the Bible for the evolutionist. It can only be found one place in the world, the textbooks. There's no geologic column, and they know it. This fellow says, if there were a column of sediments, unfortunately, no such column exists. The geologic column is a hoax. Does not exist. It is stupid. Those layers cannot be different ages. If the geologic column were all in one place, it would be 100 miles thick. Didn't happen. By the way, if the geologic column were true, if you look at the side of Grand Canyon and see all these thousands of layers, why are there no erosion marks between the layers? Don't you think if one layer sat there for 10 million years waiting for the next one, it would rain once or twice? No erosion marks between the layers. Interesting. Oh, something to consider anyway. Those layers are all deposited very rapidly, and I think we can demonstrate that scientifically. If you take a jar of dirt, put some water in it and shake it up, and set it down, it'll settle into layers for you automatically. It just takes a few minutes. It's called hydrologic sorting. The gravels go to the bottom, and then the sands and the silts and the clays. It'll sort just like that, folks. Go home and do it with a jar. You'll see what I'm talking about. And the guide said, now, boys and girls, this layer of rock right here is about 70 million years old. My daughter was 12 at the time. She raised her hand. She said, mister, how do you know that layer is 70 million years old? He said, well, honey, we tell the age of the layers by what kind of fossils we find in them. They're called index fossils. Oh, she said, thank you, sir. We walked around the other side of the dinosaur, and we're standing over here, and the guide said, now, folks, these bones you're looking at are about 100 million years old. My daughter raised her hand again. She said, mister, how do you know those bones are 100 million years old? He said, honey, that's a good question. We tell the age of the bones by which layer they come from. She said, excuse me, sir, but when we were standing over there, you told me you knew the age of the layers by the bones, and now you're telling me you know the age of the bones by the layers. She said, isn't that circular reasoning? I thought, wow, a chip off the old block. That guide had the strangest look on his face. It was almost as if he were thinking. Million, real impressive, huge numbers. Now, Charlie Darwin did not like round numbers. He wanted to be more precise. He said the Weldian deposits are 306,662,400 years old. Now, okay, Charlie, I think that's stupid. Those layers are not different ages, folks. All over the world we find petrified trees standing up, running through multiple rock layers. Now, if you get a petrified tree standing up, running through different rock layers, I don't think it's smart to say those layers are vastly different ages. Petrified trees in the vertical position. They find them all over the world. Okay, here's one from Alabama. Come out of a seam of coal through 20 feet of rock into another seam of coal. They found about 3 dozen of them, I think, in that one little coal mine, one little area, while they're digging the coal out. Petrified trees standing up. Cookeville, Tennessee. They found a bunch of them. This one's 30 feet tall, standing up. Joggins, Nova Scotia is famous for their petrified trees standing up in the vertical position. all over the area there, folks. Those trees did not get slowly covered by the sediments over millions of years. They would rot and fall down. Sometimes the petrified trees are upside down, running through many rock layers. Scientists estimate at the bottom of Spirit Lake in Mount St. Helens there are now 20,000 trees that were blown out by the volcano. Thousands of them are standing up in the bottom of the lake, already buried 15 feet deep in mud. None of them grew there. Those trees are going to petrify. It only takes a few years to petrify a piece of wood. In the laboratory, it can be done in 24 hours. So what about carbon dating and potassium argon dating and rubidium strontium dating and lead-208, lead-206, uranium-235, uranium-238? We're going to explain a little bit about radiometric dating and how it's supposed to work, and then show you that it does not work, okay? The Earth's atmosphere is about 100 miles thick, and we're also protected by a magnetic field. Radiation from the sun and from the stars, mostly from the sun, goes right through that magnetic field, some of it does, and hits the atmosphere and produces carbon-14. Carbon-14 is radioactive. Normally, carbon is atomic number 6, which gives it atomic weight of 12. But this nitrogen, which is right next door to carbon, gets struck by radiation and it turns it into carbon-14. Now, carbon-14 is unstable. It is radioactive. It's always breaking apart. And you can hear it like with a Geiger counter, you know, click, 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 just like uranium, because it's decaying. They've discovered it decays at a fairly consistent rate. About half of it will decay every 5,730 years. Which means if I gave you a pile of carbon-14, 5,730 years later, half of it would turn back to nitrogen. The rest would still be carbon-14. Theoretically, it's a random event, but it could, that's probably how long it would take. During photosynthesis, plants are breathing in carbon dioxide, and this radioactive carbon is mixed in with the regular carbon. The plant doesn't seem to know or care if it's getting radioactive carbon or regular carbon. It just takes it right in. Animals eat the plants and make it part of their body. Probably during your lifetime, you have either eaten plants or you've eaten animals that have eaten plants. You probably have radioactive carbon-14 in you. Now, theoretically, what you have in you should match whatever's in the atmosphere, about the same percentage. Because the plants are always breathing this stuff in, and the animals are always eating the plants, and we're always eating the plants and the animals, so it should pretty much stay in balance. It is assumed the ratio of radioactive carbon-14 to normal C12 in the atmosphere would be the same found in living plants and animals. That is an assumption, but it's a reasonable assumption. The atmosphere today is 0.0000765%. Not much. That's how much carbon-14 it has in it. When the plant or animal dies, it stops eating or breathing. So whatever it had in it begins to decay. Since half of it will leave in 5,730 years, all you got to do is check to see how much C14 is in it, how much C14 is in the atmosphere, and if it's only got half as much, it's been dead for 5,730 years. Sounds great, but doesn't work. In theory, it never goes to zero, but it goes from a half to a fourth to an eighth to a 16th to a 32nd to not much, okay? After 4 or 5 half-lives, you can't measure it. So if anybody ever tells you, we know the Earth is millions of years old because of carbon dating, you can rest assured they don't have a clue what they're talking about. Because if it worked, it would only work for 30 or 40 or 50,000 years maximum. They compare the amount of C14 in the object being dated with the amount currently in the atmosphere and estimate how long the object has been dead. It sounds good, but there are some assumptions that mess everything up. Okay? Assumption number 1, has the amount of C14 in the atmosphere always been the same? Has it reached equilibrium? This is an interesting problem. If I told you to fill a barrel with water, but I drilled holes on the other side of the barrel, while you're filling it, it's leaking out. At some point, it's going to be leaking at the same speed you're filling, and that point is called equilibrium. You will never fill the barrel past that point, unless you plug the holes or fill faster. You're going to have a hard time telling me unless you're willing to make some assumptions. How tall was it when it started? Oh, we don't have any idea. Has it always burned out at the same rate? Oh, we don't know that either, do we? You find a fossil in the dirt, you can measure how much C14 is in it. Very accurately, by the way. And you can measure how fast it's decaying. That's just like measuring the height of your candle and how fast it's burning. Now, when did that animal die? You don't have a clue. Unless you're willing to assume that the C14 when it was alive is the same as we have today, and assume the rate of decay has always been the same down through history. You can't prove either of those. Living mollusk shells were carbon dated at 2,300 years old. Hello, they're still alive. Freshly killed seal, carbon dated 1,300 years old. Shells from living snails, carbon dated 27,000 years old. That's stupid. He's still alive, okay? I know snails are slow, but 27,000 years, he'd be dead, okay? One part of a mammoth is 29,000 years old, another part's 44,000. One part of Dima was 40,000 years old, another part was 26,000, and the wood next to it is 9,000. The lower leg of a mammoth is 15,000 years old, the skin is 21,000. Two mammoths found side by side in Alaska, one is 16,000, one's 22,000. Which number is right? Living penguins, carbon dated 8,000 years old. 11 human skeletons, the earliest known human remains in the Western Hemisphere, were dated by accelerator mass spectrometer. All 11 dated about 5,000 radiocarbon years. Lava from a 1801 Hawaiian lava flow was 1.6 million years old. Well, hello is not even 200. Another volcano erupted in Hawaii in 1959. When they dated the lava, it was 8.5 million years old. At least potassium argon dating for that, not carbon. Mount Etna in Sicily, I climbed Mount Etna when I was over there some time ago, erupted in 1972, 350,000 years old. Mount St. Helens built a new lava dome in 1982. They dated it, got numbers from 350,000 to 2.8 million. It's not even 20 years old. Here's what you ought to consider about carbon dating. Samples of known age, it doesn't work. If it's a sample of unknown age, it is assumed to work. That's stupid. In the last 2 years, an absolute date has been obtained for the Gandong beds above the Trenel beds. It has the very interesting value of 300,000 years, plus or minus 300,000 years. Well, they nailed that one right on the head, didn't they? See, back in 1770, George Buffon said the Earth is 70,000 years old. 1905, the official age of the Earth was 2 billion. When they went to the moon, they said the Earth and the moon are 3.5 billion years old. 3.5 billion, dated with potassium argon dating. Now they're telling the students it's 4.6 billion years old. Let's see, that means the Earth is getting older at the rate of 21 million years per year. That's 40 years per minute. Aging rapidly, folks. That's stupid, okay? All they do is add more time to make the theory look more reasonable. Long ago and far away. And when you prove it couldn't happen, they say, well, it was longer ago and farther away. Then they're going to tell the students one of the evidences for evolution is embryology. Now, there aren't too many things about this whole theory that make me angrier than this, so I'm going to try to stay calm and cool and collected while we discuss this. Ernst Haeckel, an embryology professor at the University of Jena in Germany, loved evolution theory. When Darwin's book came out, Ernst Haeckel read that book the next year and said, wow, this is a great theory. All we need now is some evidence. 9 years later, they still had no evidence. So Ernst Haeckel decided to help Charlie out. He was an embryology professor, the study of animals before they're born. You know, the different embryos of all these different animals. He made drawings that were fake to make them look alike. The students are taught we have evidence from development. I don't think so. The similarity between early stages in development of many different animals helped convince Darwin that all forms of life shared common ancestors. Actually, Darwin considered this by far the strongest single class of evidence in favor, a class of facts in favor of his theory. This is stupid, folks. I'll show you. This textbook says, the human embryo growing in the mother has gills like a fish. Those little folds of skin are not gills, okay? Excuse me. Those little wrinkles under your chin when you're growing up later develop into bones in the ear and glands in the throat. They never have anything to do with breathing. The point in his thinking was when he read Darwin's book, 1860. Haeckel took a drawing of a dog and a human embryo and he changed them to make them look exactly alike. His fake drawings looked almost identical. On top are the real drawings, underneath are Haeckel's fake drawings. He lied, folks, intentionally. He made huge charts of his posters of his drawings of these embryos and traveled all over Germany and just about by himself converted the Germans to believing in evolution. Which later led to the obvious question, well, if evolution is true, then maybe one of the races of people has developed farther than the rest. Which, by the way, is a subtitle to Charlie Darwin's book. You can look at it for yourself. The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. See, Darwin was a racist. On top are Haeckel's fake drawings. Underneath are actual photographs of what he claimed he was drawing a picture of. Now, either he's a lousy artist, or he's a liar. Well, it turns out he's a liar. He was convicted of fraud by his own university. Proven to be a fraud. But guess what? Haeckel's fake drawings are still used in textbooks in your state right now. Here's a textbook used at the University of West Florida, in the middle of the Bible Belt. It's only been proven wrong 125 years ago. I know it takes a while to get textbooks up to date, but that ought to be plenty of time. That's stupid. Those are not gill slits on the embryo. Here's an Irish textbook. I was just there a few months ago. It says the embryo has gill slits. That's baloney. This one says the embryo has gills. Glencoe Biology says they have gills. Proven wrong 125 years ago. This biology textbook says the human embryo has gills. Here's this Tim Barra writing his book on the myth of creationism. And he mentions the gills are evidence for evolution. You're only 115 years behind, Tim. Miller's still teaching it 125 years after it was proven wrong. I debated Miller on the radio on a St. Louis radio station one time. There's a college textbook still teaching the kids the embryo has gills. This one says it shows the kids a 5 to 6 week embryo, but it says by 7 months the fetus looks from the outside like a tiny normal baby, but it's not. It's not a baby at 7 months. Excuse me? A whole bunch of kids born at 5.5 months survive. 34%. That's stupid to say it's not a baby at 7 months development. Maybe you heard about the woman that had surgery on her baby before it was born. They cut the mother open, cut the uterus open. The 5-month-old baby, 5 months in development, reached out and grabbed the doctor's finger. It's not a baby, huh? If it's not a human being, what kind of being is it? If it's not alive, why is it growing? Why do they keep that in the textbooks? Well, that's the only way to justify abortion. They want you to think it's not a human yet. Just a fish with gills. No, it's a human the instant it's conceived. And abortion is murder. Plain and simple. They say bird feathers evolved from scales. Well, that's stupid. In the first place, they come from different genes on the chromosome, okay? Developed totally different. A scale is a hard wrinkle in the skin. They attach to the skin very differently. Feathers are incredibly complex, folks. Unbelievably complicated. They're both made from the same protein, keratin, and that's where the similarity stops. So what? Battleships and forks are both made of iron. Doesn't prove they both evolved from a tin can. Proves the engineer's using the same material for different functions. And God used keratin for fingernails and hair and scales and feathers. So, same designer, that's what it proves. A lot more on the bird evolution in the book Icons, if you want to get that. Then they tell the kids about the peppered moth. Yes, boys and girls, somebody in England went around and counted the moths on the trees. Must have been a government project. They discovered it's 95% light moths and 5% black. Well, so the story goes, they burned coal in the factories, the trees turned black, and the moths changed to black moths. Because when they counted them again, they said they found 95% black and 5% light. Actually, the whole story is a lie. It never happened. After 40 years of watching, they found 2 moths on the trees. 2 total out of 40 years. So they glued dead moths to the tree to take a picture for your kid's textbook. Then he wanted to get a picture of a bird eating a moth, so he put some moths in the refrigerator to calm them down, so they got nearly frozen. Then he put them on the tree, and they couldn't even hang onto the tree, so he warmed them up on the hood of his car. Put them out there on the tree, and the moth is staggering around trying to warm up, you know, and a bird ate one. He got a picture. Wow, proof of evolution. It's a lie. Didn't happen. Even if it were true, dark moths and light moths were there at the beginning, and dark moths and light moths were there at the end. The ratio of population might have shifted, but the story wasn't true. So, doesn't prove anything. That's stupid. That's not evidence for evolution. They tell the kids, we've got vestigial structures. Now, a vestigial structure is something you don't need anymore. They'll say, boys and girls, you have an appendix that you don't need anymore. That's a vestigial structure. That's proof of evolution. Well, excuse me, you do need your appendix, okay? That is stupid. The appendix is part of your immune system. If your appendix is taken out, you can still live, okay? But it increases your susceptibility to quite a few diseases. You could live without both your legs and both your arms and both your eyes also. That doesn't prove you don't need them. Does it? There are no vestigial organs. And even if there were, that would be the opposite of evolution. That's losing, not gaining. This textbook says, boys and girls, whales, and many organisms here, like a whale, retain traces of their evolutionary history. For example, the whale retains pelvic and leg bones as useless vestiges. I'm sorry, that's not true. This one says, just imagine whales walking around. It's true. These little bones right there is what they're talking about. Just imagine him walking around. All he needs is a good imagination and some LSD, and you'll be able to see that whale walking in real life. This textbook says, the whale's pelvis is evidence of its evolution from four-legged, land-dwelling mammals. Well, that is stupid, okay? Those bones in the whale's abdomen are essential to hold muscles that support the reproductive system. Without those bones and those special muscles, the whales cannot reproduce. This has nothing to do with walking on land. It has to do with getting more baby whales. So the author that wrote this is either ignorant of his whale anatomy and should not be writing a book about it, or he's a liar trying to push a theory off on our kids. Here this one says, whales once lived on land. Whales were not always sea dwellers. Modern whales show skeletal evidence of previous existence on dry land. Buried deep in a whale's hip muscles are two small bones, all that is left of the whale's pelvis and hind legs. That's stupid. The male and female bones are very different on whales. Check your whale anatomy and tear that page out of your book. Has no business being in there. This textbook says, humans have a tailbone at the end of the spine that is of no apparent use. I was debating a guy in North Alabama. He was the president of the North Alabama Atheist Association or something like that. He got up and he said, folks, we've got evidence for evolution. Humans have a tailbone they no longer need. When it was my turn, I got up and I said, Mr. Patterson, I taught biology and anatomy. I happen to know there are 9 little muscles that attach to the tailbone, without which you cannot perform some very valuable functions. I will not tell you what they all are, but go read your Gray's Anatomy and you can figure it out. We're going to tell the kids that lobe-finned fish show evolution. Yes, boys and girls, during the Devonian period, 410 million years ago, there were fish with lobe fins. What that means is a short arm and then the fin grows. Well, that's stupid, okay? The lobe-finned fish are still alive. They're called the coelacanth. And when they found the first coelacanth in 1938, first people didn't believe it. They said it can't be true because they died millions of years ago. When they finally proved, yes, they're still here, all they said was, wow, they survived for millions of years. Never dawned on them to maybe question the whole theory. Never dawned on them. When Dr. Roy Mackal went to Africa and did expeditions on dinosaurs still alive in the African swamp, University of Chicago microbiology professor Dr. Roy Mackal wrote this book. He went over there twice, interviewed folks who've seen living dinosaurs, people who've never seen a white man. When he showed them the Apatosaurus, they said, yeah, that's Mokele Mbembe. He lives out in the river. He's not friendly. Don't get close. Dr. Mackal said, fellas, that's a dinosaur. They've been dead for 70 million years. The natives said, well, we're sorry. We didn't know about that. All we know is we see them out there once in a while. So Mackal gets back, writes this book, and says, folks, there are still some dinosaurs alive in Africa. Then he says, it's amazing they survived for 70 million years. Never will cross his brain that maybe your basic theory is wrong. That thought will never enter his mind, I don't think. It ought to. Lobe-finned fish are still alive, folks. They tell them trilobites are good index fossils for rock that is 600 million years old. Well, that's stupid, okay? There's a human shoe print where a guy stepped on and squashed a trilobite. How could a human step on a trilobite? I'd say 500 million years ago. One guy said, maybe aliens visited the planet and stepped on a trilobite. Trilobite had the most sophisticated eye ever found in nature. It's one of the first animals to evolve, and it's already got the most complex eyeball. I don't think so. The whole thing about index fossils is stupid, okay? There aren't any index fossils. The graptolites are the index fossil for 410 million-year-old rock, and yet they're still alive right now in the South Pacific. They tell the kids the dinosaurs are index fossils for 70 million-year-old rock. Folks, dinosaur blood was found inside the bone. Don't you think it's going to decay in less than 70 million years? There's enormous evidence that man and dinosaurs have always lived together. Gene Thomas, missionary friend of mine, was in the Congo swamp for 42 years as a missionary. He said, I had 2 pygmies in my church that killed and ate one. Yes, dinosaurs are still alive. California, 1925, this thing washed up on the beach called California's Nessie. Laid there on the beach and rotted away. Here's a guy behind it with a rifle. In the front you can see the critter's head, neck going off to the right. The neck was 20 feet long. One atheist wrote me a letter and said, Hovind, you're so stupid. Don't you know that was a whale? Show me any neck on a whale, would you please? No, I think dinosaurs have always lived with man. They were called dragons for most of history. People killed most of them. There could be a few still around. It wouldn't affect me at all, okay? I don't think there's a lot of them, but there could be a few still out there. They changed the name in 1841 to dinosaur. That's all that happened. And man exterminated most of them. They mentioned in the Bible for evolution, because flies in the north have wings 4% larger than flies in the south. That's proof we all came from a rock. That's stupid. I'm sorry. Then they tell the kids, boys and girls, today you're going to learn to think critically. Watch this sentence here carefully. Some kids doing this for homework tonight. Boys and girls, do you think humans are still evolving? Now, what kind of question is that? That's one of those questions like, have you stopped beating your wife yet? Well, if I say yes, I'm admitting I did. If I say no, I'm still doing it. Go back and look at the original question. Do you think humans are still evolving? Doesn't that question assume that evolution has happened? What if a kid doesn't believe in evolution? How's he supposed to do his homework tonight? That question does not teach him how to think critically. That teaches him what to think, not how to think. That's a Soviet-style indoctrination type question, and the textbooks are full of them. They're not learning how to think. And when the kid gets done with this course, he's going to think he knows how to think. But he doesn't. He knows how to be told what to think. Brainwashing at taxpayer expense. Adolf Hitler said, you let me control the textbooks, I'll control the state. What is in these books anyway? There's a lot of good science in there, but there's some poison. Professor Wilson at Harvard University said, as were many persons from Alabama, I was a born-again Christian. When I was 15, I entered the Southern Baptist Church with great fervor and interest in the fundamentalist religion. I left at 17 when I got to the University of Alabama and heard about evolution theory. 1 year of college destroyed his faith. Philip Wentworth said, when I went to Harvard in the fall of 24, I was not only a Christian, I was a candidate for the ministry. Then for 4 years I underwent a process of mental readjustment which shook my little world to its foundations. Through it all, one thing was clear to me. If I could reconcile religion with intelligence, I knew that I could go on into my chosen career fortified by the experience. If I could not, every consideration of honor would compel me to make other plans. In the end, I gave up the ministry. Scott wrote me a letter and said, Dr. Hovind, until I went to college, my faith in God was sound. My college history class helped destroy that faith. I started to doubt the Bible and God's Word. I even started to doubt Jesus was truly God's Son and that He died and rose for my sins. My best friend showed me your tapes and I was in awe of what I saw. Everything I thought I knew about life was changed. 75% of the kids from Christian homes that go to public schools are going to lose their faith after 1 year of college. 75%. Professor Bonar said, evolution is a fairy tale for grown-ups. The theory has helped nothing in the progress of science. It is useless. Malcolm Muggeridge said, I am convinced the theory of evolution, especially the extent to which it's been applied, will be one of the great jokes in the history books of the future. It's a joke. And it would be a joke if it weren't for the tragic results. How many kids are taught this thing every day and believe it, and it destroys their faith? Adolf Hitler was a strong believer in evolution. He thought the Jews were an inferior species and needed to be eliminated for the good of humanity. Joseph Stalin was an evolutionist. Trotsky was an evolutionist. Pol Pot from Cambodia was a strong believer in evolution. Now, if you want to believe in it, that's perfectly fine. I don't care what you believe in. But the devil is laughing at you for believing in that. He has you fooled, and he is laughing at you. Okay? If you want to believe you came from a rock, well, you just enjoy yourself. But that's not science. God made this world. God loves you. God has a plan for your life. And if you don't want it, well, that's your business. But God loves you, and He wants you to come to heaven. And if you'd like to find out how to go to heaven, come see me. I'll be glad to show you. I'm going. It's not because I'm good. If I get what I deserve, I'm in serious trouble. But I've been forgiven by the blood of Jesus Christ. You can have the same thing. Scientists who go about teaching that evolution is a fact of life are great con men. The story they are telling may be the greatest hoax ever. In explaining evolution, we do not have one iota of fact. Evolution is a shell game. You ever seen those shell games where they put the pea down there and they put the 3 shells on it and the guy tries to get you confused, you know, he messes them around? Evolution is like a shell game. If you ask the biologist, where's the best evidence for evolution? He'll say, oh, it's in geology. I said, Dr. Pigliucci, you have gotten $650,000 in grant money to study evolution of plants. You've been teaching a course on the evolution of plants for 30 years. What is the best evidence of evolution you're aware of? And he said, the evolution of whales. You're a botanist telling me the evolution of whales is your best evidence? It's always this way, folks. The geologist thinks the anthropologist has the evidence. The anthropologist says, oh no, we don't have it. The biologist has it. It's a shell game. The only problem is there's no P under any of them. It's a joke. Sir Arthur Keith was selected to write the foreword to Darwin's book when it was republished in 1959 because he was a strong believer in evolution. Arthur Keith said, evolution is unproved and unprovable. We believe it because the only alternative is special creation. And that is unthinkable. I mean, you're not even allowed to think that maybe there's a creator? The only alternative. He's right, by the way. The Russian atheist astronomer came to America and spoke at one of the universities, and he started off his speech, he said, folks, either there is a God or there isn't. I thought, boy, this guy's brilliant. And then he said, both possibilities are frightening. I thought, wow, that's a good statement. You see, if there is a God, we better find out who He is and find out what He wants and do what He says. If there is no God, we're in trouble. We're hurtling through space around the sun right now at 66,000 miles an hour, and nobody's in charge. It's real simple. The Bible says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The Christian view of history is very simple. God made the world in 6 days just like He said He did. And that explains all the symbiosis relationships. How can certain animals and certain plants require each other? Which one evolved first? There are zillions of symbiosis relationships that can't be explained by evolution. The pre-flood world was very different. The people lived to be 900 years old. It's all there, folks. We just got to get a good biblical view of history. God created this world. See, it's real simple. Let's summarize here. God made the world. It didn't evolve. Evolution is stupid. But if God made the world, He owns it. That means He makes the rules, like the 10 Commandments. We are guilty of breaking His rules. I'll show you. Rule number 9, commandment number 9, thou shalt not bear false witness. That means don't lie. How many of you have ever lied before? Number 8, don't steal. How many ever stole something? You already told me you're a liar. Now come on. You don't have to read very far to realize we're guilty, which means we're going to be punished. Or find a substitute. See, I can't substitute for your sins because I got a whole bunch of my own. But Jesus Christ is not only willing, He's able. He wants to take your place. He wants to pay for your sins. It's real simple. Hey, if you died today, where would you go? You ought to think about it because you will be dead for a long time. Doesn't matter how long you live, you're going to be dead longer than that. You know George Washington died 200 years ago, and he's still dead. How much longer does he have to go? You're going to be dead for a long time. All you get in this life is a little bitty dash between two dates. Just a little, and it's gone. What are you going to do with your dash? Let me give a suggestion to you. Give the whole thing to Jesus. Say, Lord, you may have it, the whole thing. One time a little boy saw Jesus preach, and he had a little sack lunch, 5 biscuits and 2 fish sticks. He said, here, Jesus, you can have the whole thing. Jesus said, thank you, son. Everybody sit down, please. 5,000 men, plus women, plus children. We can assume probably 20,000 people. Jesus started breaking those fish sticks and bread up and making fish sandwiches and started passing them out to the disciples, and everybody sat down in the grass and they passed them out and passed them out and passed them out and passed them out. When they got all done, everybody was stuffed. You want another fish sandwich? Oh, no, I can't. No, man, I'm stuffed. He said, okay, disciples, gather up all the fragments. They got 12 baskets full of fragments left. That little boy came home from the meeting. Mama said, hey, son, how'd you like your lunch? Oh, Mom, you won't believe it. Was it good? Oh, it's good, Mom. You have any left? Hey, disciples, come on in here, would you please? See, he decided to give it all to Jesus. Now, he ended up getting fed himself. He's one of them 20,000 that got fed, you know. He could have kept it and got fed, or he could give it away and get fed. Worked the same either way. If you could learn to give your life away to Jesus, you will get a wonderful life. Plus, it'll bless lots of others. Some of you ought to quit worrying about knocking that dumb ball into the hole in the dirt and start worrying about who's going to heaven or hell. And you ought to quit worrying about getting a fancier car and a fancier house and start worried about who's going to heaven or hell. Maybe God gave you that good job so you can give some money to missionaries, not so you can build a bigger, fancier house. What are you doing for the Lord? I saw this tombstone the other day at a cemetery. Wayne Strickland, atheist. Hasn't died yet. He said, I'm a busy man, don't have time for this. I'm sorry, Wayne. You're going to have lots of time here coming up soon. Claims to be an atheist. Interesting. The Bible says the fool has said in his heart there is no God. Did you know God doesn't believe in atheists? Where would you go if you died? Now, if you're not sure you're going to heaven, you ought to give your heart to the Lord and get saved. If you are saved, you ought to find something to do for the Lord.
will you tell him save me and please stand up? I repeat, will you tell him save me and please stand up? We're gonna have the problem here.
Y'all act like you never seen a nice person before. Y'all are hoping the Lord, your pain and tongue is just thirsting for more. Started looking around, searching cause you're uncertain, you're sure you know where you're going eternally. If you return to God, oh wait, no wait, we're sinning. We couldn't get saved with all the things we did, can we? And Dr. J says, nothing you did is such a grave sin, it cost you salvation. Heavenly living's above every man. Chicka, 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 he's crazy. I'm sick of them born agains walking around asking if you know God, speaking to you know who. Yeah, but there's no proof, no. Yeah, I probably got a couple of you who think I lack proof, but no worse than what's going on in America's classroom. Sometimes I want to get on TV and just spread the truth, but can't. But the school can tell me we come from evolution. My mama was a fish. My mama was a fish. And if we're monkeys, you might as well forget original sin. And that's the message that we deliver to little kids and expect them not to question on their own if God exists. Of course they're gonna wonder if the Lord's fake by the time they're 4th grade. They got the Easter Bunny and Santa, don't they? We ain't shining examples. Well, some of the scandals are caused by people posing as evangelists. But if Jesus loved his enemies and Pharisees, and there's no reason that you can't get another chance and believe. But if you feel a slight chill, I got the antifreeze. This is not a fantasy, it's important and it's free. I'm sin freely, but Christ for real, baby. It's a wonder he saved me and just didn't hate me. So won't you tell him, save me, please stand up. Please stand up, please stand up. Yes, I've been crazy, yes, I've been real shady. I always wanted him to save me, but just didn't say it. So won't you tell him, save me, please stand up. Please stand up, please stand up. Will Smith don't gotta discuss Christian path to salvation. Well, I do. It affects him, it affects you too. You think I give a care if he likes my parodies? Half of you kiddies won't even look at me, let alone stare at me. But Jay, why don't we pray? Wouldn't we be weird? Why? Would you guys reach across to split with your peers so you can live in fear the next 60 years? This ain't imaginary, better get prepared. The price of sin, yes, it costs you daily with death.
A group called American Atheists are not exactly getting into the holiday spirit. Now, here's why. Just in time for Christmas, they put this billboard up in the heart of Times Square in New York. It reads, "Keep the merry, dump the myth." Our very own Ainsley Earhart hit the streets of New York City to see what people thought of this advertisement. Take a look.
Ladies, could I ask your reaction about this billboard? Do you see this? It says, keep the merry in Christmas, so keep Santa, but dump the myth, and it's a picture of Jesus. What do you think?
I don't like it.
Why not?
Well, why is it easier to believe in a man in a fuzzy red suit than it is about that Christ that lived and was born 2,000 years ago?
Jesus is the reason for the season.
That's really crazy. I mean, wasn't Santa the myth?
I don't like it.
Why don't you like it?
Because I think Christmas is Christ.
Does it upset you to see that?
Yes.
Why?
Ridiculous. Because that's what it's all about. It's about Jesus.
This billboard says, keep the merry, meaning keep Santa, but dump the myth. They're calling Christ a myth.
I think that's wrong. I think Christmas is about Christ. It's the main, it's where it all started. Santa Claus came after Christ.
No, not good.
We serve a living God. That's his son. He walked this earth.
You know, Christmas, the whole holiday season is because of Christ.
Horrible.
I think it's disgusting.
You surprised to see that in New York?
No, you're not surprised to see anything in New York.
What's your message for the people who put that up?
If you really believe that, there's no reason to, you know, try to impose your viewpoint on everyone else.
So they're saying they should keep you and dump Christ.
Yeah, they're wrong.
If they had to dump one, which one would you pick?
Wow, joining me on the show, Dave Silverman. He is the president of American Atheists, a group that put up that billboard. You didn't even have your own money. You had to get it from somebody else, a donor?
Well, we have lots of donors at American Atheists.
All right. I don't really care what your views are. I get it. You don't believe in God. That's fine. You're free to believe whatever you believe. Is it just Christians you're picking on, by the way? In other words, have you ever done a billboard campaign against people that are Jewish or Muslims?
Yes, we have.
And what have you done against the Muslims?
We put up a billboard in Elizabeth, New Jersey that said, you know it's a myth in Arabic. And we put up a billboard in Brooklyn that said, you know it's a myth in Hebrew.
What was the reaction?
Actually, the Islamic billboard, the Islamic people were actually all about, well, this is a free country and you can say what you want, and some people agreed and some people disagreed.
Well, look at the reaction to the Danish cartoons, or look at the reaction to this YouTube video.
But you know what that is? That's actually a form of terrorism. That's actually a form of them getting us to obey their religious beliefs without imposing the rule of law on it. They scare us into obeying their religious beliefs. It's against their religion that we're not
care what you believe. I get it. You're an atheist. I'm not going to sit here and convince you. You believe nothing can come out of nothing, which is what I believe atheists in the end have to believe. But that's not the argument. You want to insult people. You want to attack them. You want to, you know, stick them in the ribs on their holiday. and you just want to be rude and narcissistic and mean. Why?
Sean, we have never put up a billboard criticizing people. We criticize religion, and religion is perfectly open market.
But people believe in religion. I'm a Christian. I look at a picture of Jesus, and you just want to rub salt in a wound.
No.
Why are you doing it then?
Because this is the time of year when so many atheists who call themselves Christians drag themselves to church against their own will because they think the church...
Atheists who call themselves Christian. You don't know
Atheists who call themselves Christians.
You said it. You said
well, let me
article.
Explain what I'm saying here, okay? They drag themselves to church because they think that church is an integral part of Christmas, and it's not. We're saying for those people, you can keep the merry, you can have a party. You don't have to go to a church in which you don't believe. You don't have to pray to a God in which you don't believe, and you don't have to donate money.
Nobody's forcing you to go to a Christian church, a Catholic church, a synagogue, or a mosque.
I disagree.
Wait a minute. Well, if they're allowing people to force them to go, that's their problem.
Well, and we're telling them not to. That's exactly the point of the billboard. Don't allow people to force you to go to church.
We know that a large population of Christians are actually atheists.
Yes.
If they are really atheists, and they don't have the courage of their convictions. I mean, you're an atheist. You come on this program and you say you're an atheist.
Right.
All right. What am I? So
there's a lot of familial and social pressure that keeps atheists in the closet, and we at American Atheists are trying to relieve that pressure.
You are too full of yourself to believe that people care.
No, they care very much.
I don't really care.
I know you don't care, Sean, but a lot of people do care, and they care very much because they think they're alone. And we're here to tell the atheists of this country that they are not alone.
So they're that weak that they can have their families pressure them and force them into stating they're believers when they're not.
I wouldn't say the word is weak. I would say the word is forced by their family and familiar pressures.
No, nobody's forced. They're too weak to stand up for their
I don't want to use the word weak, but I do want to use the word misguided. And we think that it is misguided for an atheist to call himself a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim when they should come out of the closet and give the gift of honesty this year to their family. It's the greatest gift.
So what happens when you die? What do you think happens?
You die, just like everything else in the universe. Yes.
That's it. There's nothing else.
It's not a pretty picture. This is it. There's no fantasy here. The reality is that every living thing dies.
Do you believe in the Big Bang Theory? Do you believe in evolution?
Yes, of course I believe in evolution. Evolution is
now my next question is, so where did all of those molecules and energy come together to collide to create universes within universes, the sun, the moon, the stars, the planets, human life?
The fact is,
nothing came out of nothing.
The opposite is God did it, and where did God come from? He came from nothing. Did he have parents? Did he have a creator? No, it's not a difference.
Because you're looking at this from a very narrow, egotistical vantage point.
It's not about ego. It's about science,
You can't believe there's something greater than you.
No, that's not it at all. The fact is that in absence of knowledge, if we don't know something, that's not evidence for an invisible magic man in the sky. That's evidence for the fact that we need to learn more. That's what it means.
Good to see you.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show.
Merry Christmas.
Happy holiday, Sean.